Chair, we are live.
Good evening, everyone. We are the Historic Districts Review Board, and I am calling this meeting to order. Melissa, may we have a roll call, please?
Yes, Chair Rios,
Here.
Vice Chair Guida,
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Here.
Member Berkeley.
Here.
Member Beachside.
Here.
Member Bienvenue,
Here.
Member Larson. Madam Chair, you
Excused.
have a quorum.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes.
No changes? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
Rita moves to approve.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
A roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. We have minutes of November 22nd, 2022. Any changes to these minutes? Vice Chair Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Melissa, just one change, page 13, the fifth paragraph down. It's Italianate, ATE. That was just an autocorrect. That's it for me.
Any other changes? Member Beachside.
Thank you. Melissa, on page 18, the fifth paragraph, third sentence reads, the board's role is to, could you please change it to consider this state project while balancing that? Thank you.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All of my changes are on page 12, paragraph 7, the same change that Member Guida pointed out about the spelling of Italianate building. The next one was, she thought the 6-foot setback change was, let's see, the setback change was needed to insufficient. In the sentence, sorry, before that, that reads, and pattern and proportion of the windows add in are not in harmony with the streetscape. And then at the very end of the paragraph, add in or a preference after is a requirement. That's all. Thank you.
Anyone else? Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On page 17, the last paragraph on that page, the third sentence, take out the words "and country" at the end of that sentence. And in the first paragraph on page 18, first full sentence where it states the brick building is a beautiful building, comma, add the word "but" before said by the governing body to be non-contributing. That's all I have. Thank you.
If there are no further changes, is there a motion to approve as just amended?
Rita moves to approve as amended.
Bienvenue seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. We have 7 findings of fact and conclusions of law. Any changes to any of these? It appears, Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2022-5471-110 Calle La Peña. In finding number 15B, it states the new doors are similar in appearance to existing doors, comma, are not uncharacteristic of the Spanish Pueblo style. I would ask that the phrase "are not uncharacteristic of the Spanish Pueblo style" be deleted for the reason that the board discussion indicated that they were not of traditional Spanish style, but they were similar to the existing windows, which was the reason for the approval. Then on subparagraph C, where it states the new windows are divided light, comma, characteristic of the Spanish Pueblo style. Again, for the same reasons, I would delete characteristic of the Spanish Pueblo style.
Thank you, Member Bienvenue. Any other changes? Member Beachside.
And just a question for staff. I didn't see the findings of fact and conclusions of law for the St. John's case. Is that delayed for a reason?
Chair Beachheit, I'm sorry. Chair Rios, member Beachheit. The findings and fact and conclusions of law were not finished by the attorney due to an unexpected illness, and you will be seeing them at the next meeting.
That's great. Thank you.
Very much. Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I just had one more in case 2022-5859 HDRB 500 Montezuma Avenue. In conclusion of law number 2, I would delete the "and" after the semicolon in subparagraph B. Delete the period at the end of subparagraph C, add a semicolon and the word "and," and then add a subparagraph D stating that the vertical windows not go all the way to the parapet, as consistent with the findings of fact.
Thank you. If there are no further changes, I will entertain a motion to approve these as amended.
Bienvenue moves to approve as amended.
Beachside seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Matters from the public. Is there anyone here wishing to speak about something other than your case? Anyone on Zoom, Heather?
Yes, Stephanie Beninato would like to speak. Stephanie, you can unmute and please state your name and address.
Stephanie Beninato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I had asked Ms. Lamboy to share something I sent to her, which was about staircases and elevators inside buildings. And I wanted to show you that in the case on Palace, that an interior elevator would have taken out only some of the ceiling, rather than having the historic material of a wall and window, the exterior window and wall removed, which didn't really seem to bother the board all that much. And it seems to me that the board is going outside its purview when it insists that it needs to preserve significant institutions. I don't see that in the law anywhere. I don't see that schools are accepted. Oh yeah, here it is. Thank you, Heather. If you see this is a really amazing thing. I was thinking of having to take a staircase out, but apparently you don't even need to do that. And so this was an alternative that would have impacted very little historic material and would have impacted no exterior historic material, which is your purview, exterior, not interior. And I have to say that I'm very distressed when the assistant land use director tells you that she and an attorney are working around having due process, because the city council hears all recommendations from planning commission, from hearing officers. They hear those as de novo hearings, meaning they are quasi judicial and they need public hearings. And so I believe that every exception that you grant is going to have an individual hearing in which the whole case will be presented again, because that is what is done with planning commission, that is done with what is done with hearing officers. And if you think that the historic board should be something different, I would suggest that you are not looking at due process and you are not thinking of this body as a quasi judicial decision-making or recommending body. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Anybody else, or did you wish to comment, Heather?
Just in response to Ms. Benanato's concern, with reference to, we did some research with the city attorney's office and got the opportunity to not only speak with Mr. Rubelid, but also with the city attorney, Aaron McSherry. And it has been determined that that is a de novo case. There are some rules with reference to what can be an item on the consent agenda. And so it was our thought that that could be a possibility. And I said that I was still researching it. But we now do have a definitive answer that it will be heard de novo by the city council. Any exceptions that are outside of height will be heard by the city council de novo.
Thank you very much. I appreciate knowing that.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? Heather?
Nobody else has their hand raised now.
Okay, and no one else has their hand raised here, so we will go to staff communications. Anything under staff communications?
With reference to the concerns relative to exceptions lately, staff has responded to that, and we have submitted a legislative request. I have been working with both Carly Picarillo as well as Nicole Thomas, who is a consultant and has previously worked in historic preservation with the city. She's helping us with our workload and also those technical issues. And I have a draft, which wasn't ready for tonight, but will be ready for January, in which, I would like to sort of get some comment from the H board, make sure that there's is what you would expect and want to see for an amendment to chapter 14 relative to the granting of exceptions. So you can expect that next time. And that's all.
Thank you, Heather. We are going on to old business. We have 2 cases under old business. And before we move on, I will tell you that we have a 2-minute limit for speakers, not the presenters, but anyone commenting on the case. I will limit you to 2 minutes. And if Melissa or Heather or Angela, do I have a volunteer? Can you help me with the 2 minutes? Someone? Heather, thank you. And also I need to tell you, if you disagree with the decision that this board renders this evening, you can appeal to the city council, and that would be 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been approved. So the first case this evening under old business is located at 220 Rodriguez Street. And do we have the applicant here or applicants? And may we hear that case, please?
Just one note to IT Tenson, it's not showing up on the smaller screens. It is on the big screen. I'm sure he'll fix that while I'm presenting. So with reference to this particular case, 2022-5463, the applicant is requesting changes to 220 Rodriguez Street, which is in the downtown and East Side Historic District. I have both the aerial and the vicinity. I'm sorry, it's a little small to see, but the site is located off of Rodriguez Street, and in the overall vicinity is located to the east of Armijo Street, where Armijo and East Palace Avenue intersect. And it is also slightly within the lot itself is slightly within the escarpment district, but the applicant's proposal stays out of that area. So with reference to the construction of the house, and you do have a Hickby in the packet that illustrates the history and construction of the home. It has been constructed in, over time. And when I first came to Santa Fe in 1995, I lived off of Hillside, and I was in a family compound as well. And the beauty of these compounds and these residences is that they evolve over time, responding to needs of the family and, the generations of the family that live there. So the little green diagram in the lower right-hand corner of the screen illustrates things that have happened over time. So there are portions of the building that are estimated to be having been constructed in 1890 or at least pre-1912, where it's illustrated on the King's map, which is that graphic number 2. And then there were changes made subsequent to that. And in 1973, there was a plat of survey that was done that illustrates the rectangular shape of the house. There were additions on the east elevation that have been since demolished. So the proposed changes for the property include the following: replacement of all doors and windows with aluminum clad windows, removal of the historic protruding vigas on the north elevation, which is the picture on the right-hand side of the screen. That is the north elevation. Raise the east end of the north facade by 5 feet or 4 inches, which significantly changes the massing. I'll have illustrations of those for you in just a moment. Construct an addition on the south elevation that will have a connecting hallway, which will be a kitchen, and add a steel arbor entry and yard wall connected to a coyote fence. So the picture on the left is the existing south elevation. And you can see is somewhat symmetrical, similar to the footprint of the building. If you'll take note of the topography, you can see that there's a large drop over the property, approximately 6 feet of the existing house from the northern side of the house to the southern side of the house. There's a flat area for the front yard area, and there are retaining walls and the like to on the site itself. The illustration on the right is what the applicant is proposing. For most of it, they're staying within the existing footprint, with the exception of the northeast corner. The height will remain the same, but at that northeast corner, the proposal is to raise the parapet height 5 feet 4 inches in that sort of triangle that is on the upper right-hand side of that drawing. And then the applicant also would like to provide a connecting hallway off of the south elevation, and the rectangle at the southern portion of the site represents the new kitchen that they are proposing. This is a street view of the site. So while the things are somewhat blocked by a coyote fence, as you pass by the property, the south elevation figures prominently as part of the streetscape. And you can see the stepping of the buildings beyond that helps to illustrate the changes in grade and sort of the layers of development as you go up Rodriguez Street. So the applicant is proposing those window and door replacements. Some of those windows and doors are not historic, and staff has no objection to those, the aluminum sliders. But with reference to some of those that are historic, staff has concern. The existing north elevation, you can see the stepping down the hillside, and then on the proposed north elevation, the 5'4" increase on that northern portion of the site illustrates a significant change of the building shape and character from what was historically. On the existing east elevation, you can also see that fairly large change for that increase in parapet height by 5'4" albeit the height is within the permitted height. There's other considerations associated with this property, and that would be that it is a contributing residence and does have existing heights associated with it. And those alterations to the building do need to consider things other than height in terms of impact to historic status. And then on the left side of the proposed east elevation, you can see the proposed kitchen area and connecting hallway. And once again, this addition would be taller than in true form. I mean, it steps down the hill, but it will be taller than the existing historic building. On the south elevation, which is considered a primary facade, the result of the kitchen addition is that a portion of that facade would be blocked from view along the street. And so therefore, as you proceed up the street and remember the street view, you will primarily see the proposed kitchen. And likewise, on the west elevation, there is a historic opening that had been closed up. And so they want to reestablish that opening, and so therefore there's no concern with that particular piece of those non-historic openings or openings that were there historically being reestablished. But the addition, once again, you can see the relative relationship and impact on the existing historic building. And this is just a detail of the building, just illustrating the changes in height and the steps in massing. And please keep in mind that the historic building is in the center of the picture where you see the 2x2 steel frame arbor. That is an addition, as well as the addition that is 16 feet, 8 inches height at its highest height from finished grade, and the kitchen addition. And then once again, there's the northeastern portion of the house that is higher than the historic home. And I'm sure the applicant will have much better presentation than I will in terms of the architecture. So I'm just going to touch on some renderings that were provided. And this is the west elevation. And then once again, that's sort of noting the change in grade. That I use this because I've been talking about that in our presentation. And then the view of the house and the proposed changes is illustrated here. So in clear view from the road, as you experience driving up, what you will see primarily is the kitchen addition. So with reference to the exception requests, the applicant has requested the following: to construct an addition on a primary facade, that's south elevation, to construct additions that impact the original form and integrity of the property, an exception for additions in a style that is not old Santa Fe style. You can see that the style of the additions are more modern in character. And an exception to replace historic windows that are not in kind. So the proposal is for the aluminum clad replacement window instead of a wooden divided light window. So with reference to the staff recommendation, I'm bringing you back to this graphic showing the evolution of the house. Staff finds that the exception criteria have not been met, and there are also that staff finds that the addition and the overall changes to the house would downgrade the status from contributing, and we would have a loss of historic fabric and character, and therefore staff does not recommend approval for the proposed project. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much, Heather. Any questions for Heather at this time or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, just 2 points of clarification. What is the visibility of the south primary facade?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, I wanted to say Commissioner, but Member Guida, the visibility is pretty significant. I will take you back to that street view. That's why I wanted you to see the street view, so that it figures as a prominent piece of the experience as you go up the street, which will be lost.
Thank you. And are the shutters historic material?
Chair Rios, Member Guida, they're more recent.
Okay.
And more recent addition to the house.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Heather, the only primary facade is the south facade. Is that correct?
Chair Rios, I believe that is correct. I need to double check, so I will.
Did you have something else in terms? Okay, thought you were shaking your head.
Madam Chair, I
Member
believe the
Lemieux.
west facade is also primary.
Okay, so we have the south and the west that are primary. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Chair Bienvenu. It's for Commissioner Bien. Oh, God. Too many commissions that I present to. So Board Member Bienvenu, I picked this up from Carly Picarilla, so I'm sorry if I'm slow.
That's fine. If there are no further questions, will the applicant or applicants please come forward and get sworn in?
They all go in to speak. And I'll go ahead and swear you all in. Do you swear under the do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Oh, I don't think it's on.
Madam Chair,
It's on. Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the board, my name is Carl Summer. My mailing address is Post Office Box 2476, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87504. I'm here tonight with the owners of this property and my clients Stephanie Sanderson and Brian Saracen. They own this property and what I'm going to go through tonight, I'll be as brief as I can, and we'll answer any questions you have. But I'd like to start with a little bit about what this property is. You probably didn't get out and look inside the property, but what's been uncovered on this property is important to what's going on and what Brian and Stephanie would like to do. I'd like to talk about the exceptions and the challenges with this property related to the exceptions. And finally, just have Brian and Stephanie tell you what they're trying to achieve with their project. And with that, I'll start. As Heather has indicated, this property is in the vernacular style, and that's not just a style. It was both the methodology when this property was built, room by room, torn down, rebuilt, added to, subtracted from. That has had an effect on its structural integrity over time, because these are not built at the same time on the same footings. Some of it doesn't have any footings. Some of them are rubble footings. And the care of that property over time, aside from its having been built not in a structurally cohesive way as we do today, it has not been cared for. This property was over time being demolished by neglect, as you all are familiar with. There were serious breaches of leaks and water into this adobe structure that have destroyed many portions of the wall. The northern side of this property, that whole wall is falling down. It is structurally, it cannot be saved, according to Mr. Crocker and his son and their analysis. That whole portion of the north wall has to be done. That's the result of a lack of care, attention, love to this property over time. And I think that is the result fundamentally of how properties like this fall in disrepair, is because they become obsolete in terms of the demands of the residential market and how people want to live and the changes that are made. People quit investing and saving and preserving their houses. That's what has happened to this house. And its current condition it's in danger of being lost just because of what's happened to it. Stephanie and Brian want to make and revive and restore this property. They have taken the inside apart to find the historic openings. They have uncovered the structural deficiencies for purposes of finding out whether they can be, the portions can be fixed or preserved. And every time they've looked, just like anybody else in restoring a house, finds things you didn't expect. What they found here was some very severe structural deficiencies and deterioration. And that's part of the desire to revitalize this property. Requires how do we make this property into something that is functional for today's needs? They intend to live and work there for the rest of their lives. They both work from home. And these 4 rooms are not functional for those purposes. And the addition makes this property and revitalizes this property's functionality in a residential, and it's not an unreasonable thing to add to a property. The challenge that brings to this property is that the south-facing facade and the west-facing facade are primary facades, and the building is tucked up against the property to the north. So the only way to add to this property at all is on the south side of the property. So that presents its own first challenge, how to add to the property in such a way that it minimizes the effect on the structure, and that particularly the south-facing facade. It was the photograph that you were shown about visibility, and Vice Chair Guido asked its visibility. That picture is taken from someone standing on a wall. It's not taken from somebody. You walk up that street or you drive up that street, that whole facade is not visible because of the fences. You are well below those fences all the way up until you get to where you can see the building. So that photograph and its visibility are not accurate in terms of what you see on Rodriguez Street on this property. I point that out because if where it's taken from, nobody sees that facade from the street until they are next to the building looking down that direction. So its visibility is a bit more, is a great deal more limited than that shows. So the effort that Stephanie and James Stodrell is the draftsperson, and are you an architect? Working on it, yeah. They've worked together to present these drawings, and they can speak to the design, but what they have tried to achieve is restore, preserve, revitalize the structure itself, and add to the property to make it functional for a residential use, a reasonable residential use. I'd like to turn to the exceptions. And I think the greatest exception that probably the most important exception that we're requesting is the attachment to the south side of this property. As I've said, there is no other place that this property can be, this building can be added onto. So you can either go up. I don't think that that's possible on the property much more than in the back corner where we're trying to do that, or you can go out on the south side. The intention of this connection is to affect that south facade as little as possible. And as you can see, it is a single connection. It is not an addition that takes up half the facade. The suggestion in the staff report was, well, you could move this addition or move an addition further east and connect it on the east side to the south facing facade. That would require an attachment to the south facing facade that would actually take up a much more impact on the south facing facade. And this is intended to minimize that. And it's constructed in a way that it has one attachment where the doorway is now, and it will be constructed and is designed so that if it ever had to be removed or was removed, or it would not affect the integrity of that facade. I will note for you all that south facing facade is one of the areas where water damage has significantly deteriorated the integrity of the structure of the building. And Stephanie and Brian are working with Mr. Crocker to try and uncover and restore how that can be done with as little removal of historic material. And we think we can achieve that. But there is no way around the connection to the south facing facade if you're going to do an addition on this property. And that goes to the question in your exceptions as to a hardship. There is absolutely no way to do it. And we present to you that itself creates hardship. You cannot do anything to that south facing facade in the terms of an addition that would comply with the code because of the nature of the property. I don't want to go through all of the exceptions and that sort of thing, but with respect to that connection, we believe that hardship is apparent and inescapable for the owner of the property. Now, staff has indicated that the style of the addition is more modern, and therefore an exception is required for the design. I submit to you that the design is totally in keeping with the style required by the code. Proportions, the height, the size of windows, openings. If there is something that is inaccurate about that iteration of the downtown east side traditional style, we'd like to know about it. We've requested that an exception because staff said that this doesn't comply with the style, we submit that it does comply with the style requirements of the code. If there is something that needs to be done to make it look as Heather indicated, less modern or less contemporary, we're certainly willing to do that. But our intention is not to violate the style code of the downtown East Side district. What I'd like to do is have Stephanie, and she is the person who principally has designed this. I'll tell you what she's trying to achieve with this, the purpose behind the changes that are being requested to this building and her intentions. And we can answer any questions after that you might have.
I have a quick question for you. Was this building vacant or not occupied for a while?
It's my understanding it was not occupied for a while.
And
But prior to that, I understand it was vacant for a while.
so we don't know what a while means.
Yeah, it's there. I know personally from having been by there and through there, I have friends that live over there. The property was vacant for a while, but it just has not been kept up. It's just not been kept up and it's fallen apart.
Thank you. Will the next person please come to the podium? You've all been sworn in.
Stephanie. I just want to start to state your address. Sure, 220 Rodriguez. Yeah, we're not living there right this second, obviously. I'm sure you went on the field trip today to the property. Did people see it today?
Some of us did and some of us
Okay,
did
great,
not.
great. I just wanted you really get a different feeling for it when you're there. We felt there was the elderly woman that was living there. They did everything they could to keep up the building, but it's adobe and that's a constant keep up. And we fell in love with the building and we're happy to be rehabilitating it, but we found some structural issues. So we had two things we really needed to do, which is repair the structural issues, replace the electrical, replace the plumbing, update a number of things. The back northeast building is the shop. That's where they've worked for years, but that was never really lived in. It's an unheated dirt floor structure, and that has always had a structural problem. And I've had an engineer look at it, and I've also had Crocker look at it, and I got the same information from both. There's a 25-foot piece of it that needs to be removed, new footings, and we want to put adobe back and put the doors back, put the windows back. That's a non-primary facade. And on the west, they've already made some repairs to the adobe, having to bolt it into the walls, into the other walls, because it was falling to the west. The southwest facade, which is primary, and where we would possibly, hopefully attach to that door, the door, window, and door are in a dangerous shape. The roof is damaged, everything. So what we're trying to do is work with the original 4 rooms, bring them up to code, but also both have studios. And the kitchen there's a kitchen and bathroom in that addition, plus a studio loft and in the southern addition. And that's really important for us to keep it modest and small, but fulfill what our needs are. And in the northeast addition, Brian's studio. And so, there's just the 2 of us, but we do need a place to work and a place to live. So we've kept it as modest as possible. It's not a modern, we don't consider it a modern addition. I studied the scale of it. The scale of the southern addition is only 2 feet taller than the original building. So we're trying to keep it really low key because we love the building. We just want to get it back on track. and make it do what we need it to do as well. So, but any other, maybe you can ask me questions if there's,
What
more
is the
specific.
existing square footage of,
1,600 square feet.
and what are you adding to that?
I want to say 508 something. 5 and change, yeah. 500 and change. Oh, 100 of that is the passageway because we stretched out the passageway to 13 feet from the south facade so that it would have some distance from the historic building and be very low. So we're trying to keep that small, but we also wanted to push it away, which was Daniel's original recommendation. Push it away, but also we want to respect our neighbors to the south as well. So we're balancing. That building is 22 feet long. Our west facade is 30 feet of the historic building. It's 30 feet, what you see from the west, and from the south, we're at, what are we? 50, I think. Right there. So I'm trying to keep very like-minded proportions. We plan on doing the addition in Adobe if possible as well. So we're trying to stick to the vernacular as well as the scale.
This question is for Heather. Mr. Summer and the owner have made reference to structural deficiencies and other deficiencies in this building. Was there a city engineer that looked at this?
Chair Rios, the city engineer or actually building official typically does not look at remodels. They look at demolition. If it is the pleasure of the board and you would like to see that happen, we certainly can do that prior to a next meeting.
So we don't have anything from the city stating in whether they are in agreement with these statements or otherwise?
Chair, that is correct.
We have the engineer. We've got 2 engineers who have letters to that effect, who came and assessed the building, but I'm happy to have the city as well. Would it be wonderful? So
There are portions of this building that are over 100 years old, correct?
100 and
Chair, that is correct.
Members of the board, do you have questions or comments at this time? Member Berkeley?
I just want to make a comment about your treatment of the building and appreciation of the building. And we may get into more details as we discuss, but I did want to acknowledge you and thank you for appreciating finding some of the original details and wanting to bring those out. I was really moved by that. And I liked on the one page where you showed all the little treasures that you found.
Oh, yeah.
while you were, taking the building apart. So I did want to acknowledge that I appreciate that part of your project.
Thank you.
May we put up the elevations on the screen, please? In particular, the one that shows the kitchen.
And just in response, this street view is Google Street View. So just as a context.
That wall, I just want to say that coyote fence from the road to the top of the coyote fence at that view is 12 feet. So, and there is no sidewalk. So if you were sitting in a car and the wall is 12 feet tall, I don't believe you would have that view, but that's just a point.
Chair wanted to give the elevation.
Okay.
Questions or comments, board members? It appears that the architecture draftsperson wants to say something. You have the floor. You may go to the podium.
I didn't want to interrupt what you were trying.
Oh, yeah, no, I was just looking at this elevation of the
Okay.
kitchen, and it seems like, okay, that's, can you change it to something else? It appeared right there on the left-hand side. That is the kitchen, or what is that?
That is the kitchen.
That is the kitchen.
That's the kitchen, studio and bathroom. And that's from the private yard. And there is no public view in where this is possible.
And would you tell us again the height of that? There appears to be like a lot of wall space.
Yeah, it's 16 on that southern point. It's 14 at the point closest to the historic building. But it goes down a hillside, we're dug in, so that we have room for that studio loft space.
And did you think of putting anything like to give that some relief?
We sure could. I was trying to keep it as quiet as possible, and I would be happy to add more windows at that elevation. It's a very narrow building. It's 17. And so it's 14 on the inside after the adobe. And we could absolutely do window relief on that south face.
Okay, thank you. And sir, did you want to say something?
Your name and address.
James Stodgel, and I'm at 3858 Quailview Lane. I just wanted to talk about how the main design ideas are we're putting lofts into the footprint of the building so that we can have more square footage. That's what her shop is going to be like above the kitchen, and that's also what his shop will be like above the shop. And that's the northeast corner. And so that's why the roof and the massing changes and comes up another 5 feet on the northeast corner so that we have enough room to put a floor in, and then enough for a little kind of overlooked balcony that goes down. So that's the reason, or the main point for why we're coming up a little bit right there on the northeast corner. On the south addition, we're actually taking the building and sinking it down into the ground. So when you're outside, you take 2 steps down into the kitchen. So the whole building is kind of actually nestled in the ground, and trying to bring the height as low as possible so that we can still have a functional space above the kitchen area. But I just wanted to sort of mention that about the main reason for the height and massing is that we're trying to not increase the footprint, but increase the square footage so that there's more usable space in the building for the functions that they need, but not trying to make it like impact the landscape as little as possible. So
Thank you for your explanation. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So just a few thoughts about this project, and I really do appreciate the applicant presentation, the stuff that goes into, I'd reiterate Member Berkeley's points about the quality of the submitted packet. This is more provocative than the type of project we usually see in the downtown and East Side Historic District. On the surface of the project, given the number of exceptions, given the amount of seeming impact to the original structure, it seems like the applicant is asking for a lot. When we look a little bit more closer, when I look a little bit more closely, I'm actually seeing a really solid design concept. The rear addition, the north addition, is in a place where we're not dealing with primary facades. We're more than 10 feet away. It's a part of the building that requires structural repair anyway. I feel like the north addition is defensible. Both, I mean, it's under the maximum height requirement, and it sits back and farther away from the primary facades. So in my mind, that particular massing does not diminish what this board has recognized as being contributing to the building status, particularly on the south and west facades. The south addition, while it does, from certain points of view, block the public visibility of the primary facade, it is pulled away from the primary structure. And I agree with the applicant that the attempt to attach it with as minimal and as reversible a breezeway as possible seems to be the kind of lightest touch for that. The other attempts, as were explained, to kind of minimize the height, to push it into the hillside, where it does amount to a building that's just only a few feet taller than the original structure, in my mind, I think is also a good move. If we can go to some of the renderings, and particularly, yes, this south elevation or the south rendering, I think where I'm struggling on 2 points, and it may just be a factor of the rendering technique, but I think it's also a factor of the approach to the historic material on the south facade. The impression that I get from the concept and from the diagram that we just explained, these two additions being pushed away from the kind of most sensitive facade, I think is fine in the diagram. In these renderings, I think the new additions are not, in my view, different enough to distinguish themselves and retain the historic appearance of the building. Heather pointed out that the shutters may not be a historic material, but in fact, the applicant is asking for window replacements that are not in kind in this elevation. I think, what could be a much stronger case could be made for retaining historic material on those facades, on the south and west facades, keeping the appearance closer to what we see on the right in the existing photograph, and articulating both the south addition and the north addition as clearly separate and non-historic. To me, that would go a long way to making the case that the existing building is being respected, and that these are sensitive additions. As to whether the breezeway actually touches the house, I think if we go to the west elevation or the west view, maybe there's a rendering of the west. I think it's kind of an unfortunate circumstance in the renderings. That I think the intent is for that steel arbor to be very light, and for there to be a space then, so we get to the breezeway.
We have we've lowered the wall that was coyote fence and 6 feet to a rubble wall that's 5 feet, and then made a very light arbor that is going to distract once the vines grow, which takes about 20 minutes here. You won't see barely the roof of the passageway, and it creates an entry courtyard at the same time, which goes a long way. And the thing about the south addition, it also has to bank, so it's at an angle to follow the road, like the original building follows the road, and so does the addition follow the road. I'd be happy to go further with more, and I'd be happy to hear your recommendations to make it feel more different. I would like to use Adobe, and it is only 2 feet taller, which seems appropriate to where we're at, but I'm open to recommendations.
Thank you. The point I'm making, at least for the purposes of board discussion, is that I think the way it's represented, it feels like there's much more new stuff in that space than there actually is in the design proposal. My sense is that it's lighter, and the buildings are just barely touching. So
Yeah, that's our intention.
okay. So I really like this in concept, and I wouldn't agree with the exception for the removal of historic material, or at least not the replacement of wood windows in kind on the primary facades. But I do support the other exceptions being met.
May I ask you a question about the windows? Because I offered this up earlier, is that if on the 2 primary facades on the west and the south, if we're reopening that historic window, but if we went back to wood windows with the same double hung pattern, but that were casement, so they take a beating, the south and the west, and I'd like to be able to still open them, because I did this on another historic house in Montana. So if we went back to wood on the south and the west, would it be possible to use the aluminum clad on the new addition
You know, that's a point for further discussion with staff and with the board, I think, but.
I just didn't know if that was one of those things that was. I read that in additions, you could use windows without broken pane. But I was recommended that I had to use broken pane even on the new addition. So I was just.
And those are the
wanted to
rules
make
that-
sure I missed,
yeah.
that I understand.
Yeah, those are the rules of the district for the
it.
divided lights, for the addition, for the new work.
Okay.
The thing that wouldn't require an exception would be, with the condition assessment on the windows, replacement in kind, which would not be clad windows.
And we do have an assessment by Ray.
That's all I have. Madam
Thank you, Member Guida. I do agree with your comments in reference to the non-retention of the historic windows on the south and the west, because I believe that presents a negative impact in that it does not retain the vernacular architecture that we're trying to preserve.
Madam Chair, I wanted to add one thing that is kind of along those lines as a detail about historic materials and the character is that I didn't make this point earlier. I think that the window issue can be fixed by just simply complying and removing that exception, and that does away with that issue. The one thing that Brian and Stephanie are doing in the shop area is as Heather noted, there are vigas, and you'll see in the photographs, there are viga posts sticking out that side. Stephanie was advised to cover them up, but she's using the same vigas, using the same material that is there and just raising that roof. And we'd be glad to have those vigas reestablished as visible, because I think that's one of the character things that we're talking about or has been talked about by staff in terms of impact. And I think that that's something I wanted to say earlier. And I think that it goes along the lines about the windows that you're talking about and getting rid of that exception and just simply complying. Thank you.
Thank you. And Heather, do we know the original color of the windows?
Chair Rios, we do not.
I have the chips. They were in the original, speaking to the owner who still lives behind me, Ed, they were raw wood at the very beginning, and then they went to white, and they didn't become, then they were green at a certain point. Now they are a turquoise of a variety. We would be happy to be at the raw wood stage for the primary facades, and then use our dark bronze clad for the windows that are where that's appropriate, so that we can have less maintenance, but on those primary facades, keep the wood windows in fur. So that's what they were originally, is wood.
Okay. Member Medrano Aguilar.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Aguilar Medrano.
So this was a lengthy and very detailed packet, and I went through it carefully. And as I was going through the packet, my takeaway was that you were both really excited about the history of the building and cared about it. And, we even saw photos of artifacts that were recovered from the building as you've taken ownership. But for me, and I also heard that echoed in your testimony today. I get that sense from you. But for me, the proposal that we're looking at today doesn't reflect that same sensitivity that I took away from the proposal. I think there's just so much about the building that's both being changed and covered up that, if these changes were to happen, I think the historic integrity is weakened from what it is today. I'm also struggling a bit with the fact, acquiring a property that doesn't fit the needs of your, work and home life that you need, but then claiming that as a hardship, when we're requiring an exception for this addition on the primary facade. So that's the big struggle I'm having with the moment, is just the addition on the primary facade in general. I just don't know that it's the most appropriate. I think this building would be better off by not having an addition on that side at all. And then, aside from the addition, I have concerns about, the changes to the masses that we're seeing, which kind of sandwiches the historic portion of the building and in my view, minimizes it. Echoing Member Guida's and Madam Chair's concerns about the amount of the historic material being removed, such as the exposed viga ends on, believe both the north and south facades.
No, just on the north. There are no viga ends being removed on the south.
Okay, just the north end where the parapet's being raised 5 feet.
And the windows have been assessed to be not being able to be fixed, more than 70% damaged, so.
I think what staff had concern of, my understanding is that they weren't being proposed to be replaced in kind. So that would be the concern, because we do recognize as a board that if something is beyond being repaired, that it can be replaced, but it needs to be in kind. Also, some general concerns about the proportion of the windows in contrast to the historic building. One example of this in the breezeway portion on the east facade, even in that one hallway portion, it looks like it's almost 100% glazing between the door and the windows. It looked like there were also some doors that were closer than 3 feet from the corner of the building, just from eyeing it. There weren't dimensions.
No, they're not closer to 3 feet. And the windows on the east are more pronounced. They're trying to catch the southeast light, but also that's a completely private yard. So even the street on the east side is not a street, but a private driveway to a private compound. So it's not something that anybody else would experience, really.
Yeah, it definitely, and maybe it's a drawing, but looking at the south elevation, that window, for instance, is 4.5 feet, and the distance from the door to the corner is far less than that. It doesn't look like 3, but
On the new edition.
yes,
See.
yes, yeah. So little details like that, and then also, concern about the steel arbor, which is visible from the street facade. But those are all just smaller comments that I thought might be helpful in case the board decides that we want to see this case again. I wanted to have some constructive comments that could be perhaps incorporated into another version if that's the direction we go. That's all for now, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions, board? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'll just make a few comments along the same lines. I think we were all very struck by this building when we did our site visit for purposes of designating primary facades and deciding whether or not it was still contributing. It's really a remarkable remnant and survivor of the changes on the east side in Santa Fe. And I just don't think you can look at this project and not see this as really removing what is unique about this property. It's not that there's anything wrong with anything that you're proposing in terms of aesthetics in general.
Right.
It's just that it no longer is the building that was designated as contributing, nor are the primary facades any longer contributing to the streetscape. And I think that's really clear when we're looking at the 3D renderings of existing versus proposed. So, I mean, we could nitpick at all the exceptions, but I think the fact that there are so many exceptions being requested.
Are there 3 or there
or groups
style exception, which
or
I still don't
groupings.
understand the style exception. I would love to understand it better.
I understand the style exception to be referring mainly to the loft addition more than the kitchen addition, but and the loft on the north side.
Non-primary.
That's the way I understood staff's report, but
Okay.
at any rate, there are 4 groupings of exceptions. It's a very dramatic change. Again, not at all denigrating the aesthetics of what you're proposing in the abstract. It's just more that what you end up with is something that would probably be fine in even the historic review district, for example, but not the core historic district, at least for this particular really significant building in the way it demonstrates that vernacular, homemade, very modest in scale building which are disappearing. And which will disappear in this case if these changes are made, in my opinion. So I'm just not sure that this property is really suitable for achieving the purposes that you need with all of the live workspaces that you're desiring. Because I completely understand the limitations that this lot is presenting you in addition to the historic status of it and how that limits your options. But that's just the nature of our designations in the historic district. So I'm not really prepared to make any particular suggestions because I think that the entire project would need to be subject to rethinking.
If I can just say that historic is so important, absolutely, but the house has multiple needs. Vernacular building that needs to be updated and rehabilitated, and we are trying to rescue the soul of the building while still making it work for us. And I understand that if we were to have a studio space separate, that would be more amenable to you, but like for us as a family and as a couple and as two working people who's purchased this building, we want to respect it, but we also have to take it into the next generation. Adobe needs constant attention and we plan to give it to it. So we're trying to find a delicate balance.
Understood.
For us.
I understand. And just on that point, I think there's a difference in our review of changes that are based on the need to take care of deterioration, for example, and those that are intended to just add more space for your purposes. And I think those have been a little confused in the presentation because certainly there'd be no dispute about all the interior changes you need to make, but we're really focused on the fact that you're trying to create quite a bit of additional
100 square feet.
yeah, both that and the additional loft. So,
Well, no,
I mean, that's really what we're looking at.
we're not adding square feet to the northeast addition has a couple of issues. It has a drainage issue.
Right.
We need to change the flow of water from the roof. The roof is changing direction. The northeast wall is falling down. And so we need to rebuild that north wall. That's the main two things that are happening. We're changing the drainage of the roof and we are changing the height by 5 feet to get the drainage and then to have a modest addition of 200 square feet, less than 280 square feet loft so that Brian has a place to work.
Sure.
So I think we're trying to work with the bones of the building. But I appreciate your.
No, and I appreciate your comments too, and I completely understand your conundrum that you're facing.
Mhm.
Thank you, Member Benvenue. Any other comments or questions? Member Beachside.
I'll just make a couple of comments. I agree with what's been said on the board. I think your willingness to entertain a change in the windows on the primary facade and to retain or reinstate the protruding vigas is very much appreciated. I think that's a great idea. I like as Member Guida expressed, I like the idea of connecting an addition with a minimal connection to the primary facade and really distinguishing those two buildings. I think the addition on the south is, the fact that it's only 2 feet taller, but it's taller than the existing house. And I think a shorter addition would be preferable. And I know that doesn't meet your needs, but just from looking at that, a shorter, even a larger footprint would be
More expensive and also significant buildings do require the step down, and contributing buildings can be up to 4 feet taller. And I felt that 2 feet was modest to be just 2 feet taller.
I mean, two is a small number, but the impact on the perception of the building from that angle seems overwhelming to me, and a shorter version of that would be preferable. The other thing I would just like to say is that I think you might want to consider the colors, and it sounds like you might even know the color, the original color of the windows. I think that bronze finish is a very modern take on color of windows. So the painted, colorful windows seems to be something that this house has had for quite a while. Also the color of the stucco, I believe it's sort of that orangey old style stucco, as opposed to this more muted, contemporary brown color you might.
Brown color I matched to the mud, the actual mud. And there was no stucco on these buildings until the sixties. Literally no stucco. I've got photos with everything growing out of the buildings, which are incredible. I wish I could do that and keep it that way. But we're trying to get as close to what the natural mud would be and have a hard trowel. That was just, that's usually preferred, but.
Yeah, no, that's exactly what we aim for new construction, is that you take a look at what the surrounding materials would have been historically and apply those. So that's a good perspective.
Thank you, Member Beachhead. Any other comments? No other comments? Anyone from the public wishing to speak on this project? If so, please come forward. It appears no one from the public unless someone is on Zoom.
Chair Stephanie Beninatto, which wishes to speak.
Okay, she needs to get sworn in.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please
Um,
state
I-
your name and address for the record.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Stephanie Beninatto, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I am in strong agreement with Member Aguilar Medrano and Member Beachhead's comments. I think that this addition to the south greatly changes the look of the building. Fences are not to be considered in whether you can see the building. I'm sorry, I'm losing my voice, just a minute. And whether you can actually consider looking at the building. I know I looked at this building to buy it. When I would go up there on my bicycle, I could definitely see the whole front, that whole south facade. I think there is an opportunity to add on to the east side, which I think another addition on not just that northeast side, but the east side that might satisfy some of their needs. I definitely agree that the historic materials need to be replaced in kind. And I definitely agree with Member Aguilar Medrano's question or comment that the applicants have created the hardship. They knew what the building was. They knew the constrictions on the lot. They knew that they would have to get numerous exceptions. And yet they bought it, now claiming a hardship because they can't live, work there. And so I don't really see how you can create the hardship and then, or create the condition, knowingly creating it, and then come in and claim a hardship. And I think the stucco, I don't know why people don't get it. That's something that's more than 50 years old is considered historic. So if it's been stuccoed since the 1960s, then that color of stucco would in fact be the historic color that perhaps should be used. And I definitely think, I mean, whether those particular shutters are actually historic, I wonder if there's a way to know if shutters were on the building, traditionally or for a long enough period, even if they've been replaced or in time as a maintenance item. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anyone else on Zoom? No? Thank you. When someone acquires an old property, they do have many challenges to meet. But this board also has an obligation to keep a building that is contributing as contributing. And portions of this building are over 100 years old. So that's where you have the challenge, and that's where we have the obligation to keep it as to resemble the old building as possible. And I do want to tell you all that it appears to me that the board is probably going to postpone the case and have you go back to the drawing board. But we do want to work with you. The board is here to, they offered certain suggestions were offered that I felt that were good. And that if you listen to those, I've sat on this board for a few years. And I must tell you that there have been old buildings that people have renovated successfully, very successfully. And it just takes a lot, it takes a bit of study and to understand the vernacular architecture. And I did read that you all were designers, and I do appreciate that. But listening to all the comments that the board had this evening, I believe that those challenges were not met this evening to keep this building vernacular. When you look at the building, at the old building, and you look at what you've presented, there's a big gap there. But I think that because you are a designer, I think that you can go back to the drawing board if that's what the board is going to dictate this evening, and come back with perhaps a better presentation to us, and keeping in mind to try to keep that vernacular building as true as possible. But let's hear from the board, because I don't vote. I sometimes simply make comments, but I do not vote except in case of a tie. So Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. A question for Heather. Would an exception be required if there was no breezeway?
Chair Guida, are you, Vice Chair Guida, are you implying that there would be no connection whatsoever? It would just be separate, or breezeway?
Just out of curiosity, and it may not suit the client's needs, but if the breezeway wasn't there, this would be a freestanding guest house 10 feet, more than 10 feet away from the building.
Rios, that is correct.
There would be no exception required for addition to primary facade. Some of the other ones might stand regarding form and alterations to the massing of the building, but that would go away as an exception if it did not touch the building.
Chair Rios, Board Member Guida, with reference to the building itself being freestanding, there would still be a regulation as to the following. So with the adjacent construction impact the integrity and historic status of the existing building, as well as just a review for the design standards being met in downtown East Side Historic District.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I'd be happy to make a motion unless there's other discussion.
Yeah, I think we're ready.
Okay, I'm ready. Case 2022-005-463 HDRB 220 Rodriguez Street. I move that the board postpone a decision in this case and have the applicant return with a revised design that addresses the board discussion tonight as follows. I think the primary issue is reducing the number of exceptions being sought. One that has already been discussed is replacing the deteriorated historic windows on the primary facades in kind, and eliminating that as an exception being sought in this case. Potentially, there is the opportunity to further reduce the number of exceptions being sought with regard to the style of the building and potentially the connection to a primary facade. So there's the opportunity to reduce exceptions in that regard. As far as the design goes, I think a presentation that more clearly shows the historic features of the building, particularly regard to the primary facades, and potentially even non-primary features on non-primary facades, such as the viga, restoring the viga, protruding viga ends on the north facade, would be beneficial. Minimizing minimizing the appearance of the changes, or at least differentiating them from the historic building, would be advantageous. That may be a change of material, that may be a change of style, that may be a change of fenestration. I think minimizing the impression of large masses being added to the building through design moves could be achieved in a revised design. I'm surely forgetting something, but I would be happy to.
Is there a second to
Entertain
this
it.
motion?
Each I will second.
Are there any amendments? I think that you mentioned color.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's a condition, but it certainly should be a consideration, considering the applicants have studied the building and seem to know the original colors of the window paint and possibly the stucco. I think that could inform maybe a different choice in the stucco that appears to be historic on the surface.
Thank you. Are there any other considerations? Member Bienvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. No other considerations, but just clarification that this is not, in my understanding, a motion for approval with conditions, but rather not an approval or a denial, but a request for you, if you so desire, to return with a revised application, taking into consideration these comments, but with the understanding that there is no guarantee of any particular outcome at the next hearing.
Thank you. And do we
Fair
have
enough.
to have?
If the mover of the motion, is that acceptable?
I would like to provide guidance that would lead to a decision next time that doesn't waste the board's time or the public's time or the applicant's time. So I don't want to suggest that this is, roulette and come back and see how we feel next time.
Sure. I agree.
So I'm hoping that there's enough consensus within the motion and the votes on the motion that this provides clear direction to the applicant, and that the applicant is able to work with our very qualified city staff on the design. I think staff is familiar with our takes on cases that come before us and can provide good guidance to meet the recommendations tonight.
Thank you. And Heather, do we have to have a date certain?
Chair
So the-
Rios, I don't believe a date certain is necessary in this particular case because we're asking for redesign. So you can say.
Well, if the
postpone.
applicant will work closely, of course, with staff.
And one other clarification, would you like the chief building official to take a look at the building as was a question?
As the maker of the motion, I don't see that as necessary. This is material that's not on a primary facade.
But I have a differing view. Yes, if we could look at it. Just
Certainly.
for clarification purposes. So we have a motion on the floor. We have a second. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much, and we hope to see you next time. We'll go to the second case under old business, and that's located at 513 Canyon Road. Is the applicant here? Yes, I see the applicant. May we have that report, please?
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the board. I'm Ramon Sarason, relatively new here. And I'm kind of doing pinch hitting duty for Carly and trying to relieve a little bit of the workload, considerable workload that Heather's carrying with current planning and the historic. So I didn't prepare the packet, so I'm not intimately familiar with the project. I went to the site visit and have a clear understanding, I believe, of the project scope. Yay. This is case 2. No, I just need my glasses.
Oh.
This is case 2022-006059 HDRB 513 Canyon Road, downtown East Side Historic District. Ayla's here as agent for Morningstar Gallery. And the owner proposes to create an addition to a primary facade on a contributing building and requests an exception to 14-5.2D 2D. Just a quick background. It's summarized in your packet beginning on page 2. So I'll just give you just a brief summary of that. 513 Canyon Road is 3,843 square feet commercial gallery, which was once a single-story residence. It's listed as contributing to the downtown East Side Historic District. The property includes rock and stucco walls and an L-shaped building with 0 lot lines on the north and east side. The east elevation is attached to the house on the adjacent property. The house is Spanish Pueblo revival style and mostly single story with a small second story addition in the northeast corner. The east wing includes step massing, chimney detail, a west facing portal with protruding vigas, carved corbels, and an enclosed portal with protruding vigas and divided light windows. At the hearing on September 13th, in case 2022-005795 HDRB, the HDRB maintained the contributing status of the building and designated the 4 river rock walls, which include the wall on the street, that would be Canyon Road, as contributing structures. The board designated the following elevations on the building as primary facades. A south elevation, that'd be facing Canyon, and the west elevation of the east wing. And a diagram of that facade designation is included on page 2 of your packet. I'm not going to go over every one of the 5 additions that are proposed for the exterior alterations in detail, but those are outlined on page 3 of your packet. Lastly, staff recommends that all the exception criteria have been met, but the board may require further testimony. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the application with the condition that the setbacks are approved by the Board of Adjustment and it complies with 14-5.2D general design standards for all H districts and 14-5.2E downtown and east side historic districts. So here you can see the location. So it's a very prominent location on Canyon Drive, and I'm sure you've seen this beautiful building. It's outlined in blue on the site map. Do this. Oh, I'm screwing up somehow.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
Just a request that we move to the applicant for the design portion of the presentation. I think staff did a great job of presenting the facts in the case.
Okay, that sounds great. If it's okay, I'll just flip through these slides real quickly so everybody has a chance to take a look at it. That's the south elevation, southwest view from Canyon Road, west facing portal. There's the site plan, the existing, the proposed site plan. Existing and proposed floor plan. Second floor, existing and proposed. Some renderings that are a little bit hard to read on this. and the elevations. And at this point is when I would like to turn it over to Gayla to go over specifics of the design. If that pleases the board.
Ramon, thank you very much. And as Gayla moves up and gets sworn in, I just wanted to say this is, as stated, a contributing building. They are adding 1,000 square feet, I believe, and for a storage room, an office, and portal for the new gallery.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Gayla Bechtel, 1813 Hano Road, Santa Fe, 87505. Thanks, Ramon. My clients are trying to combine one gallery or make two galleries out of one gallery. And in order to do that, we felt like we needed an extra or another entrance that was visible from Canyon Road. As Ramon said, the building is quite prominent. It's very visible from Canyon Road. So we've left alone the oldest portion of the project or the building and concentrated really on what was, we think, a garage studio built in between 50s and the 80s. And added another portal, added a little bit more height to the building behind it so that there is a bit more stepped massing in order to achieve the Spanish Pueblo revival style also on this portion of the building. I want to go back one, I guess that's not the right way. And is there a way to, let's see, how do I make it? I guess I even though they're kind of hard to read, I felt like that this really shows the concept of what we're after with the two portals, trying to fill in, make sense of the sort of elbows of the building or elbow of the building, taking out the wall so that both entrances are distinguishable. We are taking out the yard wall in order to also have more room for sculpture in the yard. Because when the Matucci Gallery does move here, there will be some of the sculpture that will be in the area. Okay. Now, if I get out of my Zoom. Okay, thanks. But it won't advance. Yeah, I'm going to go there. All right. So this is the south facing facade that's the most visible from Canyon Road. And this facade, you have to actually be in the parking lot to see. You can see the portal, but the existing portal. The other strong characteristic of the buildings, and especially of the older buildings, are the vigas. Some of them are actually old. Most of them have been replaced over the years, but are in the exact locations that they've been. These are the blank walls of the adjacent properties. And that is it. Happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Gayla. Any questions or comments in reference to this project? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I don't know if this isn't a question, it's a comment. So where I'm hanging up on this project is it's a beautiful addition. The portal is very attractive, but it's almost a duplicate of the historic portal. And that runs counter to our code, which requires that alterations be distinguishable from the original structure. And so I think it's a kind of sensible to do it that way, but I don't think it ever would have been designed that way originally. It's obscuring a historic facade that's been there for 50 or 70 years, I guess, even though we didn't designate it as primary. And I think it just creates an odd relationship between the two sides of the L because they just exactly almost mirror each other at this point. So I think what's kind of important to the contributing status of it to me is the contrast between those two facades and the way the portal really stands out,
Mhm.
existing portal. And so I would hate to see that contrast lost. So I'd be more in favor of creating a doorway with a much more modest entryway that does satisfy your needs to delineate that as a second entrance or even a distinct entrance for a different business, but not nearly of that scale and confusion with the historic portal that is primary. I don't know if that's something that you can work with, but that would be something I would prefer to see for those reasons.
I wanted to mention,
Member Berkeley?
I had the same reaction to that as well. It's really beautiful, but it's also awkwardly looks exactly like the old one. So I
Mhm.
wondered what kind of changes might be suggested to address that.
Would you like me to answer those questions or the comments?
Yes, no, please comment.
Yes, I agree with you. I don't disagree with the comments. I think the scale could be less, but certainly the owners, the gallery owners did want a more monumental facade, I would say, for this gallery, for the Matucci Gallery. I would be very amenable to take different elements of the Spanish Pueblo style for this portal and could certainly bring it in from the corners of the old garage building. This facade, we don't know, we know that the building was there from the 70s, but you know, the windows date from the 90s, I believe. So, but I'm happy to adjust the massing of it, both in plan and then also the style.
Thank you. So far, it appears that two board members feel that way. I don't know what the rest of the board members feel, what their feelings are. Any comments in reference to the portal that is being presented or any other part of the building? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Gayla, yeah, if you and your client are amenable to this design evolving, I think it's a great suggestion from the board and an astute observation. You know, one thing that I noticed in the existing south elevation or the wing that you're added onto is just the kind of asymmetry and the kind of stepping down of that. And I don't know if that is something that could be worked into the design or the reconsidered.
Ironically, the staff that I worked with asked me to raise the parapet behind the portal. But yes, I could work with it. It's a very, I guess we are really trying to make two structures out of one structure. And so it is a sensitive thing because we don't want to take away from the truly old one. And yet we don't want to overwhelm it either. So I'm happy to adjust some of the massing of the project. I felt like that the connection to the old building where the mechanical room is appropriately lower. And I did feel like that when I added the portal, and it might be helpful when I bring it off of the edges and plan, off the corners and plan, to make it a different proportioned portal so that I can come up with a different reading, as it were. So then whether or not I need to add the height to the building behind it would be another question. So I'm happy to take a look at that.
Cool.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular case? It appears not. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Stephanie Benato wishes to speak.
And she's already been sworn in. So go ahead, Stephanie.
Yeah, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, great. I agree with many of the comments that have already been made by the board members. I appreciate that the architect is willing to look at these issues and try to make it different, in keeping with it, but different. I do wonder about the second story of that and what the streetscape is like there in terms of height and what's the average height on the street there. Because again, that to me is a significant change in the scale of the building itself. And I think it's away from the entry, so at least it's not overwhelming you when you first come into it. But I do think it's a significant change. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'm going to assume there is no one else on Zoom wanting to speak.
That is correct, Chair.
Okay, so I will entertain a motion from the board. Member Benvenu.
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm going to move to postpone this to a date certain, just so everyone knows, but case 2022-006059 HDRB 513 Canyon Road. I move that this case be postponed to the next available date to be provided by staff for redesign consistent with comments of the board and representations of the applicant, specifically to make the portal less monumental in appearance, differentiated from the existing historic portal, smaller and pulled in further from the corner, and that the massing be potentially adjusted as suggested.
Is there a second?
We should have a second.
Is there anything further to add to the motion? It appears not. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
And thank you very much, Gayla. We move on to new business. The first case is located at 462 Arroyo Tenorio. And this is Angela's case. She is moving to the podium.
Good evening, members of the board and the public. Case I'm presenting tonight is at 462 Arroyo Tenorio, and I don't know if I did kind of a green and red winter season theme. Members of the board and public. I'm hearing echo. Okay. This is a contributing house that it's about 1,300 square feet, and it was designated, it's been contributing, and its contributing status was reconfirmed in a board case exactly a year ago that was handled by my previous colleague. And the owner has returned with a proposal to replace a pair of double hung 6/6 windows on the north end of the west elevation. And before I get any further, I'm just going to locate this for you all. It's at that 5-way intersection, really close to it, or it's further west on Arroyo Tenorio. So it has a unique footprint, which is a result of a creative traditional development as needs changed and grew. Its footprint is like a jigsaw puzzle is kind of how I can best describe it. So these photographs are capturing the street view at the top left. So as you're walking east towards Garcia and Acequia, that's the view you see from the street. It's through that opening in the gate or the wall, no gate. And that's the front of the house. That's the north elevation. The north elevation was not designated primary. On the right upper, that is the west elevation and is the primary elevation of this contributing building, showing the two pairs of 6/6 true divided light wood windows that the applicant is proposing to replace. And below the photograph there, actually the front of the house has the double trees in the front there. And these pictures are a little bit small. Just further sides of the house. The driveway leading into the house is actually, it's been a compound. It goes back and there's other houses back there. Okay, so this is the existing footprint. Like I said, it's 1,300 square feet. I'm going to read a little bit about the building itself, a little history, which was from the HICP of the previous case when the status was reviewed. The west elevation, like I said, faces onto a private drive. That's the compound driveway. It reveals the 3 building phases of the structures. The north section is a rectangular volume, and the bump out mentioned above, it holds these, I just talked about these 2 sets of windows. Upper right photograph. This stated a year ago that these grouped 6/6 wood windows are of an unknown age. And abutting to this at a taller height is another rectangular. Let's go. It's hard to tell from that. They're so faint. Okay, so north is towards the left, and the front of the house faces Arroyo, which is Arroyo Tenorio, which is on your north side of the house. This is the front mass that bumps out. The front door being here, north elevation. That window is proposed for a replacement. It's a non-historic window. Those are non-primary facades. Go around the corner. This is the west facade that has it's the west elevation. This whole part is considered the west elevation. And at the meeting before, the board designated this portion number 1, facade number 1, and the third portion, this portion as a primary facade. So excluding this in here. So the proposal is to replace that window and then replace these historic windows with new divided light clad in the color of camel, I believe it is. And let's see if we go down the elevations a little bit. So there you have the existing above. Looks the same below, but that represents a historic material change from above with new clad windows. That's the front of the house essentially, and the architect drew it without the wall. That's how it looks from the street, but this is how it is when you approach it. And this is the rear of the house. The south elevation. Okay. That concludes my slides. The According to the previous owner, the east elevation with the east elevation on the other side, which looks onto a neighboring property, was altered with a change of rough opening dimensions and a series of non-historic single light casements and double hung 6/6 windows are in that wall, and they date from the 80s or the 90s, I think, so non-historic. The property walls may predate 1973, but they were not designated along with the contributing status of the main building. Like I said, the board reaffirmed its contributing status and designated 1 and 3, facades 1 and 3 on that west elevation. And so the applicant's proposing to change out those two, the pairs of the 6/6 light windows. And the applicant did have a window assessment provided. And according to the applicant's window assessment, the origin and the age of those windows is unclear. Per the same report, the wood sashes appear to be older, but are fitted within more recent metal tracks. The applicant proposes to replace the existing windows clad wood in the color and glazing pattern that will match the Colby camel clad color of existing windows, which is a tan brown color. On that east elevation, removing this non-historic window on a non-perimeter and filling it in. And with respect to restucco to a cementitious L-rays adobe to match the existing stucco. The applicant requests an exception to section 14-5.2D5 to replace historic windows on a primary facade. Staff does not find that all the exception criteria for the replacement of the historic windows on a primary facade have been met, but the board may find upon further testimony. Otherwise, staff recommends approval of the application as it complies with section 14-5.2D, the general design standards for all H districts, and 14-5.2E for the downtown and east side historic district. With that, I stand for questions.
Thank you, Angela. Any questions for Angela or any comments at this time? Member Beachside.
Thank you. Angela, you referred to a window assessment. Is that in our packet?
It is in your packet. It's been integrated at the back of all your plans. So go all the way through your plans.
Is it from Ray Patterson? I see like a cost estimate, but I don't see an assessment of the quality of the windows.
There is one just before that or just after? Should be. You're not seeing it. The applicant didn't provide it separately, but sent it in as part of the document. And
is the assessment, Angela, indicating that they are in disrepair? Or do you know what?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Before we go much further, I'm going to make sure we see that. And this is, our discussion is centered on this. It's definitely, let's see if I can get onto my.
I believe that the applicant is showing you the report, showing us that he's got the report.
You guys can, I'm just going to let the applicant refer to that and speak to your questions about it. It was in the application.
Thank you.
And that's what my
Applicant or applicants, will you
recommendation is
please
based
come forward and get sworn in?
I'll go ahead and swear both of you in. Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
Which one? We should.
I didn't put that on the slide.
Okay, would you put it on the package? Then let's go to the bus.
Your west side.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, Maybe we could wait on the window assessment and ask questions of the applicant.
Will you start your presentation, please? Thank you.
Esteban Trujillo, 133 West Houghton Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505.
Okay, you have the floor and you want to tell us about the project?
This project is about replacing the windows, and we've been trying to get more energy efficient. The current house doesn't have insulated walls, it doesn't have an insulated floor, it doesn't have poor insulation on the roof. And one way that we can achieve better insulation is through the windows. And the current windows are now drafty and it's cold in the house. And so that was one of the main reasons why we wanted to replace the windows. Currently, we got administrative approval to replace all the other windows, and they have been replaced. The only windows that are left are these two that we would like to replace. And we're replacing them to match identical, the style that's there. And we're going to match the color of the other windows, so the house will feel like it's all one house with the same windows. The assessment, the historical cultural property inventory that we did on for Daniel, they say that the house has vernacular DNA, but it has been fussed over, rearranged, and expanded upon, so the original form is hard to decipher. So that's the nature of this house. And you can see it on the outside, you can see it on the inside. It's been played with a lot. And we tried to find more history on it by trying to find records of permitting and stuff, and that was not available. So we don't know the years. And then on the assessments by Ray Patterson, those windows, he believes that there were Pharaoh windows. That's what he called them, windows from the Pharaoh's hardware store, because of the nature of the window itself. So he doesn't believe that they're historic windows. They've been replaced, and he didn't put that in the assessment, but that was what he was telling me when we were looking at surveying the windows that on this facade.
Yes, Angela.
Sorry. You do have that, I'm sorry, in your packet, you have it. It's pages 13 and 14, have the cost assessment and Ray's window assessments. So has everybody found that? Okay, I thought you didn't have it.
Thank you, Angela.
Yes.
Oh.
So, Mr. Trujillo, your proposal on these window replacements, the light pattern and the size is going to be what was existing?
Yes, everything is going to be identical. Yes, hold on a second. Janet would like to say something.
Janet DeForge, 462 Arroyo Tenorio, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87505. I'm the owner. I've been the owner for about 2.5 years. And it's a beautiful house and it's got lots of charm, as I think was highlighted at the hearing that we had on July 27, 2021. At that time, the designation of the house was unclear, and we were requesting it be non-contributing because of the amalgamation of so many different styles over the years. And at that time, it was decided by the board primarily that even though it was kind of a mishmash of styles, they formed a unity, and I guess you call it the massing or whatever, that made it attractive and was part of the character of the neighborhood, which I totally agree with. And then but I think the board did say in that, during that hearing, that even though, because of this mishmash, and it was, but it did form a unity, that you were open to the possibility of making exceptions on the primary facade. So with that in mind, we wanted to come back and suggest that the windows be replaced in identical size, color, and basically materials. And I have some quotes from the assessments that were made by Ray Patterson of SunWest Construction. There were two assessments done. One was done on September 14, 2020. And the next one was done as kind of an update, but since nothing, is it still on? And since nothing had been changed, it was basically rehashing the same assessment from the year before. For window E, which is the window in the dining room, which is the oldest portion of the three sections of the house that dates from, say, 1929 to 33. So it's approximately 100 years old. He said that in September, he said he was not sure that the window could be salvaged and probably not of the house originally. In August, he expanded that by saying that the jamb and the sill were badly rotted. Only sashes might be reused. Rotted jamb allows water to get into the wall, so the whole window needs to be removed to fix the adobe wall. You would destroy the jamb when removing the window, so window would have to be remade. For the other window in September, window F, which is in the bedroom, which is a portion of the house that was built in the 60s. He said that the window has rotted so badly that the window would need to be removed to repair the adobe wall and would probably destroy the window jamb. He did not comment on that window any further a year later in August. His overall assessment in September of 2020 was my professional opinion that these windows more than likely are not of the original house. They should be replaced in size of openings of windows of that era. Then in August 19 of 2021, a year later, he said, my opinion of the era, age of the windows, and the windows being rotted so badly that they have caused damage to the adobe, all windows should be replaced. So those are quotes from his reports. And so we would like to request that we move ahead in replacing those windows identically.
Thank you. Questions or comments, board members? Member Guida.
Madam Chair, just a question for either staff or the applicant. The only windows under consideration tonight for the exception are windows E and F, right? The dining room and sitting room.
Correct.
Correct.
And the other window replacement has already occurred, or it's already or it's just been administratively approved? Yes.
Yes, that was in the case a year ago. They have replaced most of those windows already.
Okay.
And so these are the last two.
Okay. Thank you, Angela.
Anything else, board members? Nothing else. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular case? Anyone on Zoom? No one on Zoom? I will entertain a motion, please. Yes, Member Beecher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2022-006108, HDRB at 462 Arroyo Tenorio, I move to approve the application as submitted, noting that the exception criteria have been met on the basis that the window assessment determined that these windows cannot be repaired or restored, and that the applicant has stated that they will replace the two windows E and F in kind with respect to materials and light pattern and size.
Is there a second?
I'll second. And just to be clear that the motion is to replace with wood windows in kind, not to match the other
Yes.
replacements. Yes.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next case is located at 50 Mount Carmel Road. We have that report. Heather.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I would like to recuse myself from the next two cases, which are at the same address.
Okay. We'll call you back we'll call you back for the last case.
Thank you, Chair Rios. This is something that is somewhat familiar to you. Recently, 50 Mount Carmel property came to the board in July 27th for review of all the existing buildings and their historic status. So this particular building on the campus was designated at that time as non-contributing by the board. This is a picture that I took off of the website of one of the classes that are in progress associated with Modern Elder Academy, obviously not at this particular site, but one of their sites. The site is located in the Historic Review District, and this is an illustration of the entire campus. You can see that the carport is located on the southern portion of the campus adjacent to the Arroyo de los Chamisos and to the west of Santa Maria and to the east of San Miguel. So it is tucked back in the inside of the campus. Just a quick review of the evolution of the campus. It has changed over time, and the carport itself represents a change as well. So, starting with the Sun Mount Sanatorium, to the most recent use, the Order of the Carmelite Sisters, they have sold that portion of the property to the Modern Elder Academy, and this is yet another adaptive reuse of the campus. This is an illustration or a picture of the carport as well as the original plans from 1962 for the carport itself. The board found on July 27th that there have been changes to the carport over time, and it did not warrant contributing status. And so with that rationale, the board designated it as non-contributing. The recommendation by staff for this carport is that the demolition is warranted, or it does meet the criteria. So while the carport is historic in use since its construction in 1962, due to changes, it was designated as non-contributing. It has no relationship with the other buildings and is of no relative historic importance. The carport is not an essential part of the unique street section or streetscape. And the chief building official describes the structure as in fair condition. A memo from the building official is included in your packet. So therefore, staff recommends approval of the proposed demolition. That concludes the presentation.
Very much. Heather, any questions or comments for Heather? None. So if you will swear in Lisa, and it's nice to see you, Lisa.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Thank you. Lisa Gavioli, 130 Grant Avenue.
So Lisa, do you have anything further to add to what Heather just told us? And do you agree with her?
I just have a couple of things to add, particularly with regards to the need for the demolition, but I do agree with it. I wonder if I could get my computer screen. She has her own. Oh, there we go. There. Okay. That worked. So good evening, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm here on behalf of Modern Elder Academy. With me this evening is Eric Enfield of Architectural Alliance. And the other members of our team are listed on the screen there. I won't go in great detail, just flip through these. We are located in the Historic Review District, as Heather mentioned. The site is about 12.4 acres, and there's the existing conditions in aerial. Just to reorient you, the existing site plan and the proposed site plan. As a reminder, the board did review status of all of the structures on the campus and found that the carport, not sure what's going on, is non-contributing. And then this is the proposed site plan. You'll notice that there is no carport on this site plan. There is an emergency access and service drive in that location. And here is the proposed carport demolition, or the current location of the carport, which we're proposing to demolish. I also wanted to show our fire protection plan, and this is the primary reason for the proposed demolition, in that we are required to create this emergency access drive along the east and south side of the property, which provides adequate fire access in terms of hose length to all sides of the existing buildings. And due to the degree of renovations that are being proposed, which you'll hear in January, the fire marshal is requiring increased emergency access. So we have to create this hammerhead, as you'll see at the sort of southeast corner of the Santa Maria building. And that hammerhead has dimensions that are specified by the International Fire Code, both in terms of turning radius and in length. And so that the result is that the existing carport is immediately in the way of that proposed turnaround for fire access. Along the Arroyo side of that proposed drive, just for reference, it's a very steep slope. So we were really squeezed in a very narrow location here to create that fire turnaround. And there are some existing photos and the drawings. And really beyond that, I will just stand for questions.
Any questions for Lisa at this time? It appears there are no questions. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular case? No comments or questions. Oh, we have Adam Johnson coming forward. Please get sworn in.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Please state your name and address for the record.
Adam Johnson, 121 Arroyo Honda Trail. I have a hello board, Chair Rios, members of the HDRB. I have more comments, but I just wanted to briefly note that I recently toured the site, and the carport is an eyesore. And as Lisa's presentation indicates, modernizing the campus with a roadway on the east side of it will do a lot for circulation. So removing the structure will not detract from the significance of the campus and doesn't harmonize with other buildings at the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I believe there are no further comments, and I will entertain a motion from the board. Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case 2022-006146 HDRB 50 Mount Carmel Road. I move that the board approve the application to demolish the carport structure.
And is there a second?
2 seconds.
Was that Member Berkeley? Yes. Any additions?
Just a friendly clarification to note that the approval criteria for demolition have been met in this case.
Yes, accept as friendly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Aguilar Medrano. Oh, she's not here. Excuse me, sorry.
She's recused from.
Right. Member Berkeley. Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. And next case is at the same location, 50 Mount Carmel Road. And Heather, will you give us that presentation?
Okay. Thank you, Chair Rios. The staff presentation is actually coming from my computer IT. So I'm sure they'll move it over in just one moment. The proposal is for the construction of a new building, just to go over while we're waiting for the computer transfer, is to construct a new building on the campus to accommodate 14 guest suites, as well as a classroom and a lounge space and a courtyard. Just one moment. There we go. Thank you, Angela. We got it. All right. Same classroom that you see as before. And just reviewing the site, you can see that I have overlaid on the site plan or the campus plan, the Santa Nueva building. One thing to note is that originally this location, there were some tennis courts associated with the Sunmount Sanatorium. And it has been used in one way or another, but it is currently open space at this time. The master plan associated with, sorry, just one moment. The master plan associated with the original campus that was pulled together by John Galmim illustrated a future building, which is on this graphic here. While this proposed building will not be located exactly in that same location, it's going to be roughly in where the tennis court illustration is. There was a building that was contemplated to fit into this space. The style of the proposed building is Pueblo Revival style. The permitted height is 22 feet 1 inch. As I previously stated, the U-shaped building will have a courtyard with the guest rooms and classroom and lounge. And the applicant has taken care to have a four-sided design so as to not only address the interior of the campus with architectural detailing and presence, but also address Camino de Cruz Blanca and provide for presence along the streetscape. And just for your reference, this north elevation, what can be seen along the streetscape is primarily this area here. Beyond is the office and Fatima buildings, Santa Maria, and then the chapel is also beyond the this particular building. And so the recommendation by staff is that it complies with the general design standards, section 14-5.2D. And it complies with the design standards for the historic review district, which requires that stucco and would be primary materials in the buildings, that it's wall dominated, and rooftop equipment be concealed by the parapet. Staff recommends approval of the Santa Nueva. That's my presentation.
So for your report, any clarification questions or any other type of questions for Heather? It appears not. Lisa, you have been sworn in and you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Lisa Gavioli again with Jenkins Gavin here tonight on behalf of Modern Elder Academy. And again, joined with me from the project team is Eric Enfield from Architectural Alliance. And again, the other members of our team, which I'll just give a brief introduction to, landscape architecture for the project is done by Surroundings, and civil engineering by Design Ingenuity. So again, the neighborhood vicinity in Ariel, we're in the historic review district. As a reminder, existing conditions. This is the existing site plan. Once again, with the building statuses that were assigned back in July. Red being contributing, yellow significant, and orange non-contributing for the city's official map. And the proposed site plan with the proposed location of the Santa Nueva building. Again, as Heather mentioned, there was a future building identified on the 1961 master plan, which can be attributed to the firm of McHugh and Kidder, I believe, not directly attributable to John Galmim, but I'm sure he did advise on the site plan. And as you can see on the site, on this site plan, there the tennis court is visible as well. But in this general vicinity, the original design team had envisioned a future dormitory building. Here is an existing street view from Community Cruz Blanca. Well, not probably presently existing. It's very green, but here we see the floor plan, as you've seen in your packets, with the new classroom building and the 14 guest rooms, as well as some communal gathering space at the southeast corner there, and a central courtyard. And the elevations, this is the north street facing elevation. The top is zoomed out so you can see the full context, and the bottom version is zoomed in just to the portion that shows the new building. And then the west and south, and we can certainly come back to these if you have questions about individual elevations. Some renderings that we had done by a local artist, Lisa Flynn, of the new building facing Sun Mountain from Camino de Cruz Blanca, and then a bird's eye view sort of facing east overhead. You can see the new building situated into context, and we really see this building as completing the campus. It was always envisioned there was always envisioned to be a building here, and we really do feel that this building will go a long way in terms of completing the relationship of the buildings to one another and creating a more pedestrian campus. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Thank you, Lisa, for your presentation and for all the different views of the building. Members of the board, do you have questions or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So overall, I think the application is commendable for providing a new building that's sympathetic with the existing campus. I think both sympathetic in terms of kind of overall style of the buildings, the courtyard organization, which we see elsewhere on the campus, probably the detailing as well. So, in terms of how it fits into the campus plan overall, I'm very happy with how it fits into, an idea about this place as a campus, also very strong. I think, where I kind of hesitate a little bit, and it's in light of the conversation that we had tonight. We had two very different cases presented to us, a kind of daring case where we saw or we discussed a way of differentiating new from old as a way of responding to historic context. Another one where we saw Gala's application and we looked at something that was another valid approach, attempting to kind of blend in and merge and be sympathetic with historic context. And this board provided notes to take a step further, to maybe not duplicate so much as kind of continue on in that vein and improvise as we go. I think my concern is that this appears, and I understand it's a one-story program, and there is some slight differentiation in height, but I'm a little feeling like this is a lost opportunity, that there may be, and it may be a small thing. I mean, this building seems like such a background building. It doesn't really break the kind of parapet profile line very much. I'm wondering if there isn't an opportunity, again, still kind of understanding its hierarchy relative to the other existing buildings, the San Juan building, the school building, which has more prominence, that there might be an opportunity to add a design feature that gives it a little bit more oomph, rather than just be a kind of low background building. It's otherwise a perfectly lovely building. But it's a new building in the historic district. I'd prefer for it not to just be a compliance building. I'd like it to be something that contributes to that campus.
Any comments, Lisa or Mr. Enfield?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Eric Enfield, 612 Old Santa Fe Trail. Anthony, I completely understand. I like the fact that we hit 3 out of 4 boxes with you. I thought that was pretty good. You know, in a way, they do want to downplay the north elevation and they want to play up the pedestrian walkway that they've created inside the building. And you'll see classic elements like courtyards. We couldn't not put a courtyard in that building. Every one of those buildings has a courtyard. They also have lounges and public spaces that are open to everyone on the campus. So the use is going to be very similar to the seminary use as far as each building is a self-contained unit. It has rooms, it has lounges, it has places to gather. This happens to be the main classroom. And what we really wanted to do was give the people the same experience they're having in the other buildings without making a huge design statement on the north side. I think the detailing on the south side facing the courtyard and the amount of landscaping that we propose keep this building not saying, look at me, but more saying, this is a new building. It's small, it's not much higher than a pinon tree. And what we wanted to do was keep the historic integrity of the drive down Camino Cruz Blanco, which so many people are used to having that be open space. And we've left that open space. We also chose not to go higher because we felt like the building should just hug that ground where it was meant to be. And I think the building that was put in there in 62 by McHugh, the footprint, was a single story building also. It's been fun for me because I worked for John McHugh for 12 years and knew John Gamim and went to his memorial service. And I actually played basketball in the gymnasium when I was in high school. And Hunter had a lot to do with this building and she played volleyball in the gymnasium. So we're discovering all the spaces in those buildings. We're coming back to you with a much bigger proposal when we look at remodeling each of the buildings. But I think what you'll see is we're trying to create a building that can collaborate with a very historic set of buildings and also not complicate what it looks like or where it came from. It was a building style that was used much earlier, and we're taking the best parts of that building style and using it for this building. You can see places where we have walls that are up to 2 feet thick at the end of the corridors, establishing view lines in and out of the building. We've also changed the window types. Some have high transoms on them to reflect a height that's different on the 2 ends that project out north towards the street. I like that we're using classic details, and I'm glad this is going to be a building that complements the other buildings. But anyone that walks on this campus, when they look at this building, will say, that's a new building. There's the classroom. It's got a monitor in it. It's pretty modern, you know, and they're going to see that too from the feel of it. I think that the building is serving the exact purpose that we need for it. And I think that it's clothed well for the neighborhood. And we've worked with St. John's, Santa Fe Prep, every neighbor, the Memes, the Worths, to ensure that they're comfortable with both placement and design, and including Carol and Peter, who actually live across the street, one of the city councilors and one of our state senators. And they have looked at this design and worked with us on it and are very happy with it and think it complements both John Gamim's work and John McHugh's work, but will not be confused with him. And that's how I'd respond to you there.
Sure, I get all that, and I agree wholeheartedly, 100% with all of that. And I think the renderings show a posture towards the neighborhood, the design, you know, the kind of dance that you're doing as part of this project to you know, not do a big building, it's not needed, be sensitive to the neighborhood, all of that stuff. It's really that it seems to me there's a missing element in the courtyard. Of, you know, what we see in the other buildings, a kind of tower-ish element at the San Juan building that kind of announces the entry. You know, there's a kind of sculptural fireplace, just something that breaks up that kind of almost consistent height that we get when we're looking at this building from the south. It could be the yard wall. It could be a number of things. it's a small suggestion. But I think it's a meaningful one in the context of this campus.
The idea is to provide the shade in the courtyards, like the present courtyards. There's one courtyard right off the office between Fatima and the office. Did you guys see that beautiful courtyard? It's smaller than this one, but we're looking at having some nice shade in there, a place that can be restive, quiet. We have an obligation to be quiet because of who our neighbors are and respecting them. And that's what the Modern Elder Academy plans to do. And, you know, they're not out. This isn't an advertisement for the academy, this building. This is a functional building that completes their program. And I think that it's going to turn out fine. And there are going to be some more development in that courtyard. What it is, whether it's sculpture, probably water or something like that, I do see that happening in the courtyard. I also wanted just everyone to understand too, that there's a huge area, the outdoor portal, that's kind of turned into a room at the end, across from the lounge. And that's an open outdoor fireplace and an outdoor living room and space for people to gather. And I think that achieves what you were talking about providing different spaces and feelings to it. Why don't you just go to the floor plan? Yeah, thank you, Lisa. You can see that we have that whole outdoor room. We are making it so you can close it so it can be used in the winter, but those would be glass panels. John Galmim used to do that too, but they were removable from portals. These aren't removable. They pocket into the wall. They didn't do that in 1932. And it's going to be distinguished from the other buildings. I understand your concerns, Anthony. Maybe it would have been, there could be more statement that could be made. I think on the courtyard side, though, that's going to be all about the function of the academy, because that's going to be a central part of the new academy, because that's the main classroom for the whole academy.
On the west facade, are we looking at a monitor with clear story that's in the fireplace volume?
No, those are windows beyond. We're just making a note to you guys to show that there's no visibility of the monitor, but to give you an idea about what we're talking about for the windows.
So we wouldn't see that.
You won't see any of that.
That's on the inside of the.
It actually shows in the meeting room. You can see the dotted line on your floor plan. That in the center of the room, that's the monitor. Now it's square, of course. But we've rounded the insides to soften the interior of the monitor on the inside of the building.
Okay.
Well, thank you for your lengthy explanation. Appreciated. Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So appreciate all those concerns as well. If I could just ask the architect again, or Lisa, either one of you can answer. I really like the way you've set this down into the landscape. I think that's extremely important here because we've got two issues. I think one is harmony with the campus. So that's primarily the view from the south. And then you have harmony with the streetscape on Camino Cruz Blanco, which is equally important, but a whole different set of considerations. And I think you've done a nice job of addressing both of those. And I particularly like the low slung nature of it, the modesty, despite the fact that you're getting quite a bit of interior space, and the sensitivity that you've employed in situating it as well as designing it. So just for clarification, I think one of the things that does seem important, and I think you've addressed it, but I'd like to know, is the massing of this building needs to look similar to the massing of the campus buildings. So it needs to look like very thick walls. I just would like some confirmation about the radius of the corners, the battering of the parapet and the corners, and particularly the recessing of the windows. Are we going to be able to really see deep recesses there so that it's clear that these are thick walls?
I can address this. We used basically a 10-inch adobe as our model for our walls. So our walls will be 10 inches. We haven't exactly picked the material. We're going through budget stuff right now, but the walls will be 10 inches thick. And if you look at the plan closely, you can see the windows are offset to the interior. So we'll probably have at least 4 or 5 inches of recess all the way around. And then much more inset at the end windows, at the end of the two halls. We've provided about a 20-inch recess in those windows. So there's some variation between the windows and the depth of the windows. As far as the batter, what we've actually used is pretty much the parapet profiles that we've seen on the site for our parapet profiles. We haven't put a number to it or a radius on the stucco yet, but you'll note that we're proposing to use cement stucco. And we propose to have rounded corners.
And are the parapets battered at all, or are they just?
Well, there's,
rounded
you
corners?
see, there's just a slight slope round on them.
Right.
And they didn't do much parapets on those buildings. I don't know if you noticed how little parapets there really are. And there's not a whole lot of variation except when they do bell towers, things like that. Or
Right.
decorations over entries. The funnest part's going to be what we show you next, though, when we do these buildings and make everything now be consistent. And I'm really excited about that part of it also.
Anything further? Member Beachside.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the comments from my other board members. I appreciate the comment about the courtyard. And I don't have any specific suggestions, but it does occur to me that that may be the only courtyard in this complex that faces Sun Mountain, which is important to the orientation of this entire complex. And I think I'm reading this right. It looks like I believe these are doors to the individual rooms, and there may not be even any windows on that facade that allow you to see Sun Mountain, and instead the windows appear to be on the back, like facing the road. So I appreciate Member Guida's comment about, the statement the courtyard might make, and I just wanted to offer that as a comment.
Thank you, Member Beach. I would just address the windows in the guest rooms primarily face the north and east, and really maximizing that view towards the Sangres. And the courtyard, again, has the relationship to Sun Mountain, with the common areas having windows facing Sun Mountain, and the classroom, of course.
Thank you, board members, and thank you, applicants, for your comments. Is anyone from the public wishing to speak on this? Mr. Johnson is coming forward, and he's already been sworn in.
Thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. The Old Santa Fe Association would like to commend Modern Elder Academy and Jenkins Gavin on their sensitive planning for restoration of the former Sunmount Sanatorium and Immaculate Heart of Mary property. And I agree with Mr. Enfield that there's more to come. That's very exciting. I toured the property last week with Skylar Skikos, Modern Elder Academy's Chief Development Officer, and you have a lot to look forward to. I've studied the designs for the proposed new building, and OSFA is pleased with the design as it is low-lying and unobtrusive. The majority of the historic buildings appear to be visible from Camino Cruz Blanco. As a prep graduate, that's important to me. And the new structure is not imposing, but rather appropriately set back and aligned with the styles articulated in the campus. Indeed, the location of the new building was already a future building indicated in the 1961 IMH Seminary Master Plan, and thus even fits with the historical plan now come to realization. The Old Santa Fe Association looks forward to seeing the good work of Modern Elder Academy. We applaud such historical sensitivity and community consideration in design. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Johnson. Anyone else wanting to speak in reference to this project? No one else. Anyone on Zoom?
Yes, Chair Rios, Stephanie Beninato would like to speak.
I didn't know that I got elevated to chair. But Stephanie Beninato, PO Box 1601, Santa Fe, New Mexico. I think the application is great just as it is. I appreciate that. I understand there was this intended building, so they're going forward with that. They are keeping it low so it's not so visible from Camino Cruz Blanca, which I think everybody who goes up that street and has been used to that open space will definitely appreciate. I especially appreciate that it's not trying to make a statement, that it is a background building, because there are several historic buildings on that campus. And I think those are the ones that should be standing out. I'm not meaning that it should be plain and drab, and I don't think it is. I think it's sensitively designed so that certain parts look at the Sangre de Cristos, for example, and certain parts are facing Sun Mountain. So it's taking advantage of natural location. It is in keeping with the courtyards of the other buildings. It serves the purpose for the Elder Academy. I just want to make sure, however, because there were some statements about St. John's and about how no schools, educational, assuming educational facilities should be considered historic. And yet here on this campus, we have several. So I just want to make sure that the board is not creating an exception for schools or educational institutions. And that, of course, that these historic buildings, that you are not contemplating a status change unless the proposed designs or changes would require that. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on Zoom? No one else. I just wanted to say that I feel that this building it's not a tiny building. It's over 9,000 square feet, but in a way it's low profile-ish. And it's one story, and I do believe that it's in harmony with the streetscape and the campus. And the fact that Member Bienvenue brought out the recess of the windows, that he wanted to find that out, and it appears that it's going to be rounded corners and the windows are going to be recessed. I think those are elements that are going to be complementary to the building. So I think the building is a good one, and it's complementary to the campus and the streetscape. With that being said, I will entertain a motion. Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll make the motion. Case number 2022-006-115 HDRB 50 Mount Carmel. I move that the board approve the application as submitted with the understanding and condition that the corners be rounded and the windows have deep reveals consistent with the representations of the applicant at the hearing.
Is there a second?
Berkeley seconds.
Member Berkeley? Anything further to add? Other members? Nothing further to add? Roll call vote, please.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside, Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much and good luck with your project.
Thank you very much.
Let's get Member Medrano. And the last case this evening is located at 346 Hillside.
Okay, I have brought up a PowerPoint, so if we can reflect that on the screen, please. Thank you. So this particular case 2022-00614 is located at 346 Hillside in the downtown and east side historic district. The request for tonight is a review of the historic status as well as designation of the primary facades. The site is located to the east of Thomas Manzioni Park, which is at the intersection of East Marcy Street / Hillside and Paseo de Peralta. It is located on the south side of the street. Immediately across the street is there is additional residential development similar to this. And the hill that's reflected there is the old Fort Marcy hillside, as well as residential development to the south, east, and west. The Higbee evaluation found the following. First of all, there was a historic building inventory from 1984, which needed to be updated and reflecting a more detailed approach to the history of the structure. The home was first occupied by Fidelia May Powers Whitwell And Mr. Whitwell was actually an engineer for the State Highway Department, an appraiser for the State Highway Department, and was, I'm sorry, Fidela Mae Powers Whitwell's daughter, who lived in the house with her, was one of the assistant librarians with the Santa Fe Public Library. The site is built on land previously owned by the Martinez family, and then Oscar Fagan, who lived in the house for over 20 years, was an appraiser for the State Highway Department and previously served in the Army. This is an illustration, the Sanborn map from both 1930 and 1948 illustrate the square building with the small protruding porch and no additional additions or structures on the property. The kitchen addition on the east elevation, which is illustrated on the picture there, that doesn't have the same hipped roof, but is a flat roof, was constructed or visible first in the 1958 aerial. So it has architectural significance in its own right as it is historic. By 1968, the studio was constructed, which was originally in a garage. In your packet, you will see aerials where that is first noted. The defining characteristics of the building are the 3/1 windows, those distinctive side lights on the front elevation, that would be the north elevation, which are 2/1 side lights, and as well as the simplistic character of the front porch, the stone fireplace. And this is a building that's built on top of a stone base, which you don't find everywhere in Santa Fe. And so those that you can see on this picture are the 2/1 side lights on either side of the 3/1 windows. So it adds a distinctive character that's not found much in Santa Fe. So staff recommends on the north elevation, which is elevation number 1, shown on the graphic to the right, and that north continuance of the north elevation, it sort of peaks behind on this picture of that 1968 edition or thereabouts. I'm sorry, 1958 edition of the kitchen. That piece also needs to be included in that primary facade, as well as that east elevation, which has the distinctive stone fireplace, and as well as a window pattern that is characteristic of the building itself. So with reference to status, the recommendation by staff is per section 14-5.2C. The residence qualifies a contributing status because it is a physical record of time, place, and use. The changes that have happened to the house have acquired historic significance. There have been changes to the south elevation, and that's why it's not designated as primary. This is the south side of that kitchen addition, and you can see there is one picture window change already. There are some other changes on that side, which you will see in the next application. Namely, one of them is the sunroom, which there was a proposal for, that's in your packet, a previous proposal for an addition on that south elevation. That was never built. Distinctive features, finishes, and craftsmanship are illustrated in this building, and it maintains, therefore, a high level of historic integrity. So staff recommends approval of the maintaining the contributing status. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. And is there a garage on the property?
Right now, it's a studio that is on the property. So if you can see this in this floor plan, it's detached from the main building. That was what was constructed by 1968. It has been modified over time. So right now, its purpose is a studio. It's not a garage anymore, although you can see garage doors in that sort of front detached walls. One of them is hanging and there's another one off to the side.
And that portion you are indicating should be non-contributing, is that correct?
Yes, Chair, that is correct.
Okay, thank you. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Heather, I can't see very well your facade diagram on the right. You're proposing the north front facade as primary, the east facade, which is number 2 on that diagram?
Yes. That is
And number 3?
And number 3, that is correct.
And why number 3?
Chair Rios, Vice Chair Guida, with reference to number 3, it shows the evolution of the house, albeit that it is a simple, facade. It does have an entryway and speaks to the evolution of the house over time. On the south side of that particular structure, there have been changes that have been made. The original door and entrance stairs are there, but there's the picture window. And then I don't have a picture of the east elevation, but it is very simplistic in character and really doesn't have a relationship with the rest of the building. So that was my train of thought.
And that addition is from what period?
By 1958.
And the window and the door and the entry door that's kind of hanging in space are both historic elements as well.
The window, are you talking about on the
Addition, on the 58 edition? Yeah, on the north side of the 58th edition. The contributing, I'm sorry, the significant,
whoops, I'm
the
sorry.
primary facade of the 1958 edition
Let me
has
get to
a
the right-
small square window and a
Yes,
entry door. It's elevated.
that has not been modified.
Okay, those are historic. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
That's it for me.
Or comments? None. So Mr. Martinez, please come forward. And yes, the applicant doesn't want to speak.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Richard Martinez, PO Box 925, Santa Fe, New Mexico.
Richard, do you agree with staff's evaluation?
No, not exactly. We do agree that the north elevation and east elevation of the main house should be primary facade. This is a beautiful little house. And but the kitchen addition on that facade that is proposed as a contributing. The historic report, the Higbee report that we commissioned shows that there was a canopy, a portal on that very facade that was there through 1973 and perhaps longer. The historian John Murphy says in his recommendations, the recommendation is to maintain the contributing status for the house with the north elevation recommended as the primary facade, as it represents the best preserved and most architecturally significant aspect of the building, communicating its original design and period of association. Recommend non-contributing status for the studio, reflecting its late construction, its modest architecture and alteration. Also, I just wanted to mention that that addition that is proposed as to also have a primary facade is a very small kitchen, and we intend to propose to add on to that kitchen, and the primary facade designation would make that more difficult. We're not planning that we would have anything major that would show at the front of the house, because we don't want anything to change at the front of the house. But I don't think, because it has been modified over the years and was not a part of the original building, even though it's has a historic presence, I don't think it's a primary facade. Also, the staff report states that the residence retains much of its historic integrity as the original building. The kitchen addition on the east elevation exemplifies how buildings change over time. And yet this proposed status would tend to freeze that facade over time. And it's an expression of how the building has changed. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Martinez. So you are agreeing with staff with the north elevation as being primary, but you are disagreeing with the east elevation. Is that correct?
No, I'm agreeing with the north elevation of the main house and the north elevation and the east elevation of the main house, but not the north elevation of the addition, the kitchen addition.
Thank you for that clarification. Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. What, so on the site visit today, I think one of the things that was very striking were the windows.
Yes.
And including the windows on the west side. And I think to protect those windows, and I'm assuming you want to protect them as well, I think that needs to be a primary facade. It's also called out as the most, one of the most, in addition to the north facade by the Higbee report as being the most well-preserved part of the original building. So I would propose that that facade be a designated primary, even though that makes 3 facades, but I don't think it would probably affect the owner in anything they would be planning to do, because there's such a small opportunity to do anything on that facade anyway. Am I correct in that assumption?
That's right. Unfortunately, on this property, most of the land lies in front of the building. And so that sort of, those 3 facades being primary facades just precludes the possibility of adding. It doesn't preclude the possibility, but it makes it very, very difficult to add on that side of the building, and just puts more pressure on the rear of the building to take in whatever is needed to make this house livable for contemporary society.
Well, that makes sense, but that would be the logical place to be adding on anyway and preserving the
Yes, that's right.
contributing nature of this particular building. So,
That's right.
but again, I would want to designate that as a primary facade for the purpose of protecting those windows, because the way I read the ordinance, and we've had this problem come up in the past, very difficult to protect historic windows on a contributing structure that are not on a primary facade.
I'm not going to object to that.
Thank you.
Member Guida.
Just a small counterpoint, because I don't necessarily always want to be overzealous about designating primary facades. We have in the past, and Heather, correct me if I'm wrong, noted what are contributing elements to the status of the building, elements that don't necessarily exist on a primary facade, but are contributing to the overall status. And so I'm wondering, does a line of logic that says, okay, well, yes, the front facade of this house is very representative. By capturing the east elevation, I've taken it into 3 dimensions and captured the chimney mass, more windows, the overall volume of the house. To me, do we just say, hey, look, over on the west side, those windows too are important. They're noted as original and as contributing to the overall status of the house. Just because we will have instances in the future where the land to the west is the most developable, and the board can very clearly state in a motion or add in the details without taking the whole facade with it. Just a consideration.
Well, I appreciate that, and I have the exact same question as to whether or not that's another solution to designate a particular feature of a non-primary facade as contributing. I think the ordinance is unclear in that regard, so I think the safe approach is primary, but it does create the additional complications that you've just outlined.
Yes, Heather.
Yes, Heather.
Chair Rios, Board Member Benvenue, with reference to the primary facade and the importance of preserving, especially the historic windows on that facade. One of the things I would like to note is that there is going to have to be parking on this site, at least 2 parking spaces. And so by the limited nature of space in that area, there's going to be a limitation on what can be added on that side. with reference to noting the windows, those historic windows as being a character defining feature of that contributing status, we can certainly amend the HICP that is proposed that you have been provided to include that information and the language that was used by the H board in approving the HICP. Or, well, if you choose to approve the HICP.
Madam Chair, just one more comment, if I may. And what occurs to me, John, is that in this discussion, that the designation of primary facades has been more a matter of practice than of hard rules, and the culture of the board. And I know we're still evolving how it was done a certain way in the past, that it would only be one, and and in many cases to preserve important features and massings of buildings, we've endeavored to include more. So I'm just encouraging thoughtfulness on the board's approach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Maybe a question for staff. If the board took this direction where we didn't designate the west facade as primary, but noted that the windows were significant, if in the future, let's say an applicant wanted to replace those windows, would an exception be required? Since technically it's not replacing on a primary facade, it's just been specially notated that these are significant features. So would an exception be required?
Yes. Board Member Aguilar Medrano. I think that because it's not a primary facade, that an exception would not be required, but I'm sure that there would need to be evidence shown that the windows were degraded and not operational, or, some sort of report provided in order to address the concern that the board wants to see those windows preserved.
Thank you.
If, Member Aguilar Medrano, this is Frank Rubel, and I don't know if the record is reflected that I've been participating in this, not in person, but by Zoom. I think it's important to consider that the definition of primary facade is one or more principal faces or elevations of a building with features that define the character of the building's architecture. It seems kind of a conundrum to say that there are features that define the character of the building's architecture, but that it's not a primary facade. I mean, if those features, such as those windows or those doors or other architectural elements, define the character of the building's architecture, then by definition, it is a primary facade. I have seen designations of primary facades where there's a specification that a certain door, window, or other architectural feature is not historic or does not contribute. I don't think that's a conundrum, but I don't see that we're protecting windows or any other architectural features by saying those are important or those are contributing, but that's not a primary facade. I think that creates kind of a logical inconsistency that makes it hard to enforce later.
Thank you for that input. Yeah, we were wondering where you all came from. When you chimed in, we're looking around. We're glad you're with us via Zoom.
Well, thank you.
So, Member Guida?
Just one final point. I don't know that we need to go down a very narrow and conservative legalistic interpretation of primary facades to save a few details. I think, I think this conversation sheds light on a recent case that came before this board at the last hearing. Actually, that case came before us twice, where we were looking at window replacements on an entire house on non-primary facades. And the concern of staff, and the reason why the case came before the board, was because the concern was that although allowable, the changes to the windows in the non-primary facade would threaten the overall status of the house. So it was, again, a house with a limited number of facades designated, as in all cases, we're always designating a limited number of facades. But staff noticed that, you know, the changes that were being made that were probably allowable and even allowable perhaps on administrative approval was elevated to the board because the feeling was that so many of these windows and details would be changed that it would threaten the overall status. And so, you know, I appreciate staff's response in that case. I appreciate the decisions that this board made in that case. I think they were logical. But I don't think it's as cut and dry as saying like, oh, that's, you know, that's an important detail, whole facade.
Other comments in reference to this particular issue? Member Beachley.
Sorry, can't resist, but I think we've seen in several cases, including one tonight, where we have very little ability to protect windows on non-primary facades. Like we are not able to require them to be replaced in kind with wood, which is a common, you know, complaint in terms of expense by our applicants. So yeah, just to add that.
I agree with Attorney Rubelit's interpretation. And what Member Beachside just stated, that is correct. We'll run into a problem because you cannot protect. If this board wants to protect something, then it's more difficult to protect it, even if you call it out as a feature that is prominent and historic to and defines a particular element on a facade, that it's difficult to protect that if you don't make the facade primary. And as we all know, most cases that come before us, or many cases that come before us, come to us with exceptions. So the owners always have the option to do exceptions, even if it's primary.
Yes.
Yes, you can do it. No, you can't do it. We'll work with you. You know, you've been with us for a long time, Richard.
I know that's true.
So, if there are no further comment, did I ask for public comment already on this? No? Anyone wishing to comment from the public on this particular case? Anybody on Zoom? No one on Zoom?
Ms. Beninato just raised her hand. Just one moment. You can speak.
Stephanie Beninato. I think that if you want to preserve those windows on the west facade, that you need to make it primary. I think the west, north, and east facade should all be primary. It is a beautiful house. It deserves to be preserved. I don't think you're taking away opportunity by the owner to make it more usable for their needs, because there is a lot of opportunity on the back. And it particularly seems like the kitchen might be the object of the need for the expansion. And there really is very little opportunity to expand on the west side, because you do need access to the studio and you do need parking. And that really isn't going to go away or change anytime soon. So I would urge the board to continue it as contributing and designate west, north, and east facades as primary. Thank you.
Thank you. By the way, it is a lovely, lovely house. You're very lucky. Nice neighborhood and lovely house. Board members, I will entertain a motion, please. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Member Benvenue?
Sure, I'll go ahead. Thank you. In case 2022-006142 HDRB 346 Hillside Avenue, I moved that the board maintain the status of the main house as contributing, designate the garage as non-contributing, and designate the north and west elevations as primary and the east elevation other than the kitchen addition.
Is there a second to the motion?
Beach, I will second.
Is there anything further to add? Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley,
Yes.
Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
No.
Did you say no?
Yes.
Thank you.
I couldn't hear that either. Okay.
Thank you.
Very much and good luck with your further projects, maybe. Anything under discussion items?
There are none.
There are none. Matters from the board, anybody? I just want to say something real quick to this great board. I want to applaud you and compliment you because you really thoroughly study every case that comes before us. You give in-depth reasons why we should save a particular building or whatever, but each one of you really studies every case, and I so appreciate that. I'm really proud of you. Our next meeting is going to be on Tuesday, January the 10th, 2023. And I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Bienvenu moves to adjourn.
8 seconds.
And roll call vote. And happy holidays, everybody.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Berkeley, Member Beachside.
Yes.
Member Bienvenu, Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Good night, everyone. And thank you for the bizcochitos.
Thank you.
Member Aguilar Medrano. And I did not use the name. Thank you. So thank.
If it lasted any long.